Hey, this is Dylan Lawrence Moore with the Volitional Science Network. I wanted to make a video today about understanding sophistry, or more specifically, understanding the stratagems and thinking of a sophist, and particularly how to deal with them, because I've noticed in talking with people about this subject and just watching people how they interact when they're confronted with, we call it sophistry, but reality is just bullshit. They really don't know how to handle themselves, and often the sophist comes out really winning, despite the fact that the person really had a good grasp of logic. And I don't want to spend this video going over the rules of logic. I'm assuming that if you've stumbled across this, you're already familiar with the fallacies and how logic is put together, and the basis of it being syllogistic reasoning. What I wanted to do was look at specifically how logic stops being logic, and how what the sophist does is pretend that even though he has stopped using logic, he pretends to that the situation is still logical, that we're still having a rational discussion. So within the realm of rational discussion, we have these things called win-win interactions. We can figure out what two parties who are having a disagreement, we could figure out what they want and say, okay, is there some sort of conclusion that we could come to where both parties win? I'm calling this the reasonable circuit, as opposed to the emotional circuit. Now, in the emotional circuit, all interactions are win-lose, everything's based off of hierarchy, and everything is either submission or domination. So, either I am dominating you, or I am submitting to you, or vice versa. So what the sophist is doing is they are pretending to be engaging in a win-win interaction, when in reality they're engaging in a win-lose interaction, and their goal is to keep you from seeing that. So very similar to the rules of logic are the rules of chess. So logic has these very specific rules where, okay, this is how we put an idea together, this is how we extract an idea from two observations, and this is how we build an argument together. You can kind of see it like Lego blocks if you're connecting syllogism after syllogism. And the rules of logic are so strict and so set that if you don't follow the rules of logic in a discussion, it's called committing a fallacy. And anybody familiar with logic has probably spent some time learning fallacies, because you learn the fallacies to say, okay, there's been an error in the logic. We're no longer having a rational discussion. Now, unfortunately, understanding the fallacies, the purpose of this video, is to say just understanding the fallacies isn't enough to defend yourself. It's enough to identify that there's an issue, but it's not enough to defend yourself. So just like logic, chess has a specific set of rules. So you have a specific board. It's set up in a certain way with pieces. The pieces have certain moves, and there's a strict set of rules to say, okay, this is how the game is played, and this is how you win. And the rules are so strict that if you were to break one of those rules, you're no longer playing chess. Does that make sense? So if I'm engaged with someone in a chess game and we're going along, and he starts making rules up, like, okay, I'm going to move the knight like a bishop, or I'm going to, just take your piece off when I feel like it and say I win. Like, oh, I just knocked the king over, so I guess I win. It had nothing to do with the pieces. We're clearly no longer playing chess. There's some other game being played. And if I continue to try playing chess, so this guy's knocking over pieces and making up moves, and my response, instead of saying, hey, dude, like, we're not playing chess anymore, I'm not going to pretend we're playing chess. If my response is, okay, well, man, this guy is really good, I better bring my best chess game. It's like, let's try this French defense or this King's Gambit, and maybe I could really get him. It's not only useless, it's stupid. Because you're deceiving yourself into thinking you're still playing chess when this guy is just walking all over you. He's playing a different game. And not only is he playing a different game, by continuing to try to play chess, you're losing the game that's actually being played by default. Does that make sense? So, because the game that's being played now is I make up the rules whenever I want, or this other guy who's knocking pieces over, gets to make up the rules whenever he wants, and I just have to deal with it. So in the same way, sophistry says, okay, I'm going to pretend that we're playing this game called logic, that we're interacting together in discussion using these rules called logic. But I'm going to break rules in a way where it still looks like I'm playing chess. So I'm not just like smashing the pieces aside. I'm saying, the knight actually in this weird situation, it can actually move 2 moves this way and 2 moves this way instead of 2 and 1. And that makes sense because of this thing that you didn't know. And if I'm stupid, I'm like, I guess I just didn't understand the rules of chess. I guess he's allowed to do that, and I'm not. So in the same way, the sophist plays with the rules of logic and says, no, that wasn't a fallacy. If you're even using the terms fallacy, they're usually sneakier than using actual logical terms. No. That does make sense because of this weird rule with the moon is over here, and I actually said it this way, and you didn't know that, and I'm right. Now, if you're not familiar with the situation of logic, you'll buy it. You just don't know any difference. However, even if you're familiar with the rules of logic, and this is the point I really want to make strong at the beginning of this video, even if you're familiar with the rules of logic, you know your fallacies, and you're like, no, dude, that wasn't logic, that was the genetic fallacy, or that was ad hominem, or whatever. The sophist doesn't care. Here's the thing. I've noticed people do this a lot. Is the sophist knows that they're committing sophistry. They know that they're committing a fallacy, and for you to point that out to them, they don't care. It's not like, you caught me, I guess I'll go away now. They'll go, no, it wasn't a fallacy because whatever. The only time that you could say, okay, you've committed a fallacy is when the other person is actually interested in having a discussion. So if I'm having a discussion with somebody, and somebody commits a fallacy, and I point it out, and that person has the chance to say, either admit that he was wrong, or prove his point and say, no, it wasn't a fallacy because of this, or you reorganize his argument or something, and then we can go back to discussion. Now, if you point that out, and if you point out a fallacy, and the person gets evasive, or they get defensive, or passive aggressive, or whatever, you're not in the realm of having a discussion anymore. So what the sophist is doing is, by keeping you in reason mode, while they're technically in emotional mode, because they're broken the rules of logic, so by definition, they're not being logical or reasonable, which means we've left the realm of win-win, and we've gone over to the realm of win-lose. And a very important point that I missed, the realm of win-lose beats the realm of win-win. So if there's 2 people that come to each other, and this person's trying to have a discussion in the realm of win-win, and this person's trying to have a domination game in the realm of win-lose, the interaction is win-lose, no matter how much this guy tries to make it win-win. If both parties aren't participating in the win-win, it's win-lose. In the same way, if somebody is making up stuff on the chessboard and taking pieces off and making up rules, and I respond by going, okay, I really better focus on the rules, and I better, bring my best my best sophist game, my best chess game, I just lose the interaction by default. So the sophist is bringing a domination submission game to you. And they're setting it up in a way that they're trying to get you to lose by default. Think about that for a second. So the sophist comes to you, and they're feeding you something that looks like logic. It looks like chess. And if you're not quick and you don't understand the rules of logic, you don't understand the rules of chess, first of all, you're not going to catch it. If you do catch it, and you try to point it out, and you're like, no, let's stick with the rules of logic, they don't care. Their point is to dominate you to begin with, and they don't want you to defend yourself. So this is maybe the second thing about understanding a sophist, is that fundamentally they're cowards. Because if they weren't fundamentally cowards, they wouldn't have this dress up of trying to pretend to be trying to appear to be reasonable to you in the first place. They just come straight over to you and say, hey, fuck you, I don't like your shirt, I think you're ugly, or I think you're stupid, and let's fight. And of course, that's a type of bully, and there's a level of cowardice to that. But even at that level of cowardice, you can give them some credence that they're willing to put themselves in some sort of harm's way. The sophist doesn't want to be put in harm's way. They want to have all the benefits of dominating you without any of the side effects of you retaliating. So when you find yourself interacting with a sophist, and this is what I really see missing from people who have done the hard work of understanding logic and understanding reason and understanding argument, is when they interact with a sophist, they try to double down by saying, I'm really going to be reasonable. I am not going to stoop to their level, and I'm really going to, hold the situation up and show that I'm good at discussing. When you do this, you lose. I keep saying by default, you lose in the same way that a boxer loses a fight by not showing up into the ring. You're just openly dominated without any defense. So what needs to be done in this sort of situation is, because the win-lose always trumps the win-win interaction, you must bring yourself down to win-lose. You must bring yourself down to win-lose. Now, it's scary, and people aren't used to it, and this is why sophists can run amok, because they know people don't want the conflict. That they understand that people won't get in their face. If you learn to start calling these guys out, they're pretty good. Sophists are pretty good, normally speaking. The ones I've ever run into anyway. That if they detect that you've understood the situation, you're like, okay, I'm going to engage you on an emotional level. Like, okay, I understand that we're fighting. I'm prepared to fight you. Let's go. Is that they're going to try to pull you back up into the reasonable realm. This is really interesting. I'm sure everybody watching this has had this interaction. So you come up to someone, you're having some sort of discussion, and you start to smell the bullshit, and you're like, okay, something's up here. And if you go for it, what people like to do, they start calling out a fallacy. The sophist is very good at saying, no, it's not a fallacy because of this, or no, I make sense because of this. Or they'll even start projecting and saying, hey man, I'm just trying to have a discussion. You're starting to fight with me. Why are you being so mean? Why are you being so impatient? Why are you being so aggressive? And they do this because it's really effective. Because people will start second guessing themselves and they're like, well, am I really being aggressive? I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be the unreasonable person here. And then they go back to being reasonable, and the sophist is like, I got him. And then they go back to dominating you. The message here is that, similar to the video I made before called Stop Being Reasonable, you have to commit and stick to your guns and stop being reasonable, because here's what's going to happen. So you interact with this, you bump into your sophist because they're fucking everywhere. They grow on trees practically. And you get in this interaction, and you smell the bullshit, and you're like, okay, there's a manipulation game going on here. Manipulation being a form of domination, of course. In the sense that I'm talking about here, manipulation is this fake discussion when in reality that they're pushing you to do something for a reason that doesn't actually make sense. And you say, okay, look, I understand we're not having a discussion, and I'm either going to disengage, which I know I'm creating this video in a very confrontational tone. This is one strategy that you can use to deal with a sophist. Obviously, you have the option of just walking away or doing a many other number of things. But I want to talk about, what you do when you actually want to confront these people, because someone needs to confront these people, or else they just run amok manipulating everybody. So you engage and you say, hey, you know what? We're no longer having a discussion. You're committing fallacies. And they're going to switch over to the moral high ground and say, no, you're committing the fallacy. No, you're being aggressive. No. And they'll say it in soft tones. They'll act like they're being reasonable. They'll act like they're getting hurt in order to get you to move back up to the rational circuit. And if you say no, I'm going to, I'm going to get more upset if you keep doing this. In fact, I might even start yelling if you keep behaving this way. And now, especially if you say something like that, they're going to be like, whoa, you're so aggressive. You're so mean. I just wanted to have a nice discussion. And you say, no, I'm onto your shit. I'm prepared to make this ugly if you want to continue behaving this way. And I understand that we're having a fight, and let's go. So this of course is scary, and I'll go into other reasons why. Every single time I've stuck to my guns and really called somebody out like this, the sophist scurries away with their tail between their legs. Every single time. They don't fight me. Now, the reason for this, I think, if we go back to what I was saying before, is that a sophist is fundamentally a coward. The reason that they've got this fancy game of pretending to be logic is they can't handle the direct fight. They want to be able to dominate with no retaliation. And as soon as they smell retaliation, just like any bully that has their victim punch back, they're going to scurry away and find somebody else that their shit works on. So it's really important if you find yourself in an interaction with a sophist, which I'm sure is damn near every day. They're everywhere. And you decide that, okay, I am going to, really face this interaction and not blow them off. And trust me, there's plenty of times and places to blow these people off. Don't hesitate. Because, what they're going to do is when they say, okay, you're being mean, you're being aggressive, because you're reasonable, because you have some level of self-knowledge and self-reflection, you're going to be like, well, that was kind of a mean thing I said, and maybe I am being unreasonable, and As soon as you do that, someone's going to just jump on it and keep dominating you. They don't have any hesitation about dominating you. They don't have any hesitation about being sneaky and aggressive. Why should you? You're the one defending yourself. Now, the sophist has a second weapon, and arguably this second weapon is even stronger than the first weapon. The first weapon being that they're able to claim the moral high ground against you, and you believe it and second guess yourself so much that you let the person continue dominating you, is that they're going to claim the moral high ground against anybody watching you or anybody watching the interaction. So let's say you get in a situation where there's this manipulation game going on and there's people watching. And you realize that you're in this bullshitting situation, in this sophistry situation, and you say, okay, I think I'm gonna call this guy out. When you do that, because people don't understand this at all, that's why I have to make this video. When you call the person out, everybody watching is gonna say you started the fight. So. And I've had this happen to me before, is I'll call some guy out, we'll have this pretty intense, high-intensity interaction, and he goes scurrying away, and they look at me, and they're like, wow, you were a fucking asshole. Why were you so mean to that guy? And I have to go, no. You guys don't understand what happened. He was the asshole, he was the aggressor, he started it. Now, this is peer pressure, and peer pressure is a real thing, and it's really hard to deal with. Is that, okay, it's one thing to say, I'm going to fight with this individual who's directly across from me. It's another thing to say, it's like, okay, I'm going to fight this crowd that's watching. And what you need to understand is that because people don't understand this, there's this, how do I want to say it? Harmonic reaction where the sophist is able to claim the moral high ground and the audience is able to will claim that the sophist has the moral high ground, and so 1 + 1 = 3. where these things work together, where it's like this overwhelming effect on you, where you're going, shit, I don't know if I can stand up against this. And that's no criticism of you actually making that. I mean, that's a legitimate concern. It's like, do I really want to take all these people on? Realize that these people, whether their intentions don't matter, whether they intend it or not, because they're taking the side of the sophist, and because the sophist is a manipulator, they're taking the side of manipulation against you. And therefore, they're manipulators too. So, be prepared in this, if this sort of situation occurs where you have a sophist and there is an audience, even if that audience is like one person, 2 against 1, that sucks. I mean, make it 10 or something, it sucks even more. Be prepared to stick to your guns even after you beat the sophist and everyone comes to you and says, hey, you started this, what are you doing? Why are you being such a bully? And be prepared to lose relationships. When I started doing this, after I had an epiphany one day, I told the story in the Stop Being Reasonable video. I had an epiphany one day about all of this, about how all of this connected and made sense. And I started applying it to people in my life, and what I very quickly figured out was who benefited from dominating me and who wasn't willing to give up that benefit. So, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is already thinking of their own situations where stuff like this has occurred, and some of those situations probably have had to do with family members. And this gets unbelievably complicated with family members. I know I'm kind of drawing this in a black and white situation. With someone, with unknown people, you could say, who cares? With your friends, it's like, okay, this gets a little more tricky. With your family, you're like, I don't know what to do about any of this. So when it comes to your family, they know what buttons to push on you. They know how to manipulate you. They know how to really get under your skin, particularly because they're able to say, hey, we're family. You can't treat me this way. Project much? We're family. You can't treat me this way. And if you get into a situation where you stick to your guns and you stand your ground and you say, I'm not changing this, that may destroy the relationship because the other person might not change. Certain people are not capable. I don't know if it's genetic or they just haven't learned how to do it or they're traumatized or whatever. Certain people are not capable of win-win interactions. This is super important. Because they're not capable of win-win interactions, they see all interactions as win-lose. So when you come to them and say, hey, I would like to engage in a win-win interaction, i.e. you start trying to have some sort of rational discussion with them, because they see that you're trying to win something, and because they only interact with win-lose interactions, they must be losing. If you're winning, they must be losing. So they're going to fight you. They're going to think that you brought the bullshit. They're going to think that you are the sophist, and they're going to project everything onto you. And if that's the case, there's nothing you can do about it other than choose to be subjugated, choose to be dominated, or destroy the relationship. So the example that, like I said, I described in my other video, where this all clicked to me one day. In one 5-minute moment, this clicked to me. And the fast forward version of this story was I was with some friends at a restaurant with a large group of people coming for an event. So there was many people here that I didn't know. I had a t-shirt that had some vague political statement on it. And a guy came over and he wanted to ask me about my shirt. Or he said he wanted to ask me about my shirt. And I thought, like, oh, hey, this guy wants to have a discussion. He was very nice. He was very polite. He was very cordial. And as soon as he said, hey, tell me about the message on your shirt. And as soon as I started trying to get into it, I made it like 2 sentences in. And he immediately started criticizing me for, hey, that doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. I've heard somebody stupid say that, so that doesn't make any sense. Like, that makes sense. That's just a conspiracy theory. And, maybe some of that stuff's true, but you wouldn't know from someone saying 2 sentences. And he said that to me, and it kind of threw me off. And I said, okay, think back to the chess analogy. I said, okay, let me remember my chess rules. Let me remember my logic rules. And I started it up again. And I said, okay, here's my argument. Again, I made it like 2 sentences. And then he hit me with, it's stupid and it's bullshit and you can't actually say that. And this happened a few times, like 3 or 4 times, where I would, kind of bump into this wall and be like, what's going on? And try to start over to have this discussion. And the whole time he was leaning back in his chair. He had this grin on his face like this. And it like blinked into my head. I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm losing. But what am I losing? I thought this guy came over here to like ask me for information. I thought we were exchanging information. So what am I losing? And I said, and I realized, light bulb poof, came on. This guy did not come over here for information. This guy came over here to make fun of me. To humiliate me. Humiliation obviously being a form of domination. Furthermore, he came over here to humiliate me, and we're sitting at a table of people. Now, I don't know if he knew that these people were my friends. Doesn't really matter. I've got an audience. And so, this was pretty intense because it was the first time I did it. Calling the guy out, I just looked straight at him, and I said, dude, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. So what I did here is I said, okay, I see that we're no longer in the realm of discussion. I see we're having this win-lose interaction. I'm going to play. Tone of voice, in order to humiliate somebody, a lot of it has to do with your tone of voice. So I'm calling him out. I'll say, hey, yeah, I see that you're humiliating me. Change your tone of voice, or I'm not going to pretend to play chess anymore. And his reaction was beautiful. It's exactly what I just described, is he said, no. I really want to hear what you have to say. I came over here to get some information. Which is, he's trying to keep me reasonable. He's trying to keep me in discussion. And I just stuck to my guns and I said, hey, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. And then he switched it. Moral high ground. Whoa, you're taking this all personal. Like, chill out. You don't have to be so aggressive. I'm just a guy sitting here asking for some information. And I said, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. Became passive aggressive. Hey, now you're being mean. Hey, I'm just here and now you're attacking me, accusing me of whatever. And I said, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. And he had the shit-eating grin that he had fell off. And he was leaning back and he came in and he actually slumped over on the table a little bit. And the discussion was dropped. And he didn't last much. He didn't stick around much longer before he excused himself and went back to his table. Scurried away, tail between his legs. And now this is the first. So not only was this the first time I had done it, I had done it and it had clicked at the same time. So it was the first time I had ever realized that was going on in the interaction, and I did it at the same time. So I'm kind of like in this daze going, what the fuck just happened? And then all my friends around the table leaned in and went, man, you were pretty rude. What are you doing? That guy just came over to ask for some information. And I went, no, you guys missed it. You didn't understand. That guy came over to make fun of me, and I dealt with him. Now, I don't really remember what happened after that. I think it all calmed down, and to be fair, I figured out a lot of this after the event when I had time to sit and think. I'm like, okay, what did I just experience? That was crazy. But it was so clear to me after that what happened, and the fact that even after I was victorious, so we had this win-lose interaction, he started it, I knocked him back and I beat it, I beat him. I sit back going, hey, whoa, I just won that. And everyone comes to me going, hey, you started a fight. And I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Everyone was completely blind to what happened. And this is the problem. This is the thing that I'm trying to talk about here, is that because people don't understand logic, they don't understand sophistry, they don't understand the manipulation games and the win-win versus the win-lose and how these things interact with each other, you have to look like the asshole in order to defend yourself. Now, I've spoken about this mostly in terms of a individual interaction and maybe a couple onlookers, but when you zoom out and you kind of look at this at the macro level, and you say, okay, let's say 98% of the population doesn't understand this at all, which means in any given moment, you're either dealing with a sophist or you're dealing with a bunch of onlookers who are going to take his side in case, things butt heads like this. That sophistry, manipulation, domination disguised as discussion, is allowed to run amok because nobody recognizes it. Even if you have an individual who gets it, they have to overcome the fact that after they beat the guy that they're fighting, the whole crowd is going to jump on them and say, hey, you started a fight. The problem is compounded by the fact that most reasonable people, because they're reasonable, they really want to avoid a fight. They don't like it. I don't like it. It's intense. It's unpleasant. It sucks. So they double down on reason, which sounds reasonable. I'm going to be more reasonable. That's reasonable, right? But because they're doubling down on reason, they're doubling down on, I'm really going to commit to these chess rules. While the guy's like just smashing pieces aside and making up moves and saying I win or whatever. You're removing yourself from the game. You're actually removing your reasonable or rational capacity from the general playing field, and you're allowing yourself to be dominated. So, as a person who says, I want to become reasonable, I want to understand logic, I want to understand argument, and I want to understand how to do win-win interactions because it's beneficial, and this is what a proper society is built on, and this is how we all become wealthier and better and have more freedom. If you don't simultaneously train your intellectual self-defense skills, or even your straight-up self-defense skills, but that's a whole nother conversation. If you don't train your intellectual self-defense skills, your rational capacity becomes useless because you could simply be nullified at any given moment. If a sophist comes up and says, "Okay, I'm going to dominate you, and you're never going to interact with me on the same level," he wins. It's over. So, learning how to identify the fallacies, learning how to figure out when an argument is occurring isn't enough. You have to have the strength and the courage to not only interact with these people on an individual level, and honestly, it becomes easy because they're such cowards. When you experience that first scurry away, you're like, wow, I didn't even get a scratch. That was easy. It's the onlookers. So until we have a rational society that can spot this stuff, that can see an interaction like this and say, okay, I know it looks like that guy started it, but I'm smart enough. I know my chess rules well enough to know that guy broke a rule first. Until that happens, we have to be prepared to deal with the crowd, the second weapon that the sophist has coming against you. And so, by extrapolation, what this means is you, the reasonable person, me, the reasonable person, when we do see this, it's very, 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 very important to take the side of the guy who's actually defending himself and not take the side of the sophist. Because think about it. You put yourself back at my table where this guy comes over, and I fight with him, and he goes away. And instead of my friends leaning in saying, hey, all of them leaning in saying, hey, you started a fight, all but one lean in saying, hey, you started a fight, and that one looks at them going, no, you guys missed it. Now I have help. Now I have somebody helping me. You can be that guy. You could be that guy helping, because that helps a lot and really brings up the potential for courage in people saying, hey, I don't have to take on an army by myself. At least I got someone covering my back. So thank you for watching. These are really the flavor of video that I want to start focusing on even more. Because when I say volitional science network, volitional science, what does that mean? The science of choice. So when we're interacting with people and we're incredibly complicated and there's so much stuff to know in these interactions, in order to have choice, because when you're being dominated, that's choice being removed from you. And if you're unable to defend yourself and you're just at the whim of any dominator or any sophist or any manipulator that comes along, that really removes your choice, your ability to choose. And you being able to defend yourself and you being able to help defend others in this ribald intoxication of hypocrisy, this monument of swindlers' littlenesses, increases our ability to make choice, and being able to intellectually defend yourself, intellectual self-defense, is a realm of volitional science, and that's why I'm bringing it up, and that's why I'm saying it's so important. So there will be more videos like this to come, and hope you stick around to watch them.